Christmas night, I sat alone at a 10-seat dining table, the hanging light casting down on plates that had already gone cold. Two children's chairs pulled close beside me like an unspoken reminder. At that exact moment, my phone vibrated, not an apology, but a mistakenly sent family group chat, where my own children called me a hypocritical old man, mocked me for spending my life as a poor teacher, laughing with emojis, as if joking over the corpse of someone who was still breathing. I read each word, slowly set the phone down beside the plate, pulled my chair in, straightened my back, and understood one thing. With absolute clarity, they had chosen to turn me into public entertainment, so I would let the public see the true shape of the truth. If you are listening to my story, leave a period and let me know where you are hearing it from. Subscribe to the channel to give me more motivation to keep telling my stories. And thank you for being here with me. My name is Daniel Harper. 61 years old, more than 35 years of standing in front of a blackboard teaching history at a public high school in the suburbs of Portland. I retired early 2 years ago, not because I was tired, but because I knew I had said everything that needed to be said. Former students still call me Mr. Harper. Some are managers now, some are electricians, and some moved out of state long ago. Whenever we meet again, they still stand straight and speak neatly, exactly like when they sat in my classroom. I never accepted gifts. Parents brought fruit baskets, gift cards, even expensive bottles of wine, and I refused them all. Not because I was wealthy. I simply believed that someone who teaches history should not let students learn the habit of trading favors. My wife Margaret passed away 7 years ago due to complications after what was supposed to be a simple surgery. From the day she left, the large house grew quieter. I live alone, but my life never fell into emptiness. In the mornings, I tend the backyard garden, growing tomatoes, basil, and a few chrysanthemum bushes. In the afternoons, I revise old lesson plans and jot down things I once wanted to tell my students, but never had the chance. On Tuesday nights, I tutor a few neighborhood kids struggling with history for free. On Thursdays, I go to the community library to help organize books. The rhythm is steady, moderate, and enough to keep my mind from sitting idle. I have 3 children, all adults now, each with their own families' jobs and packed schedules. I understand that. I taught hundreds of kids how the world works, so I was never naive enough to believe blood ties were a lifetime priority pass. 2 weeks before Christmas, I texted the family group chat inviting everyone to dinner. Just one meal. No party, no gifts. I wrote the time clearly. 7 in the evening, like every year. The message was read. Responses were sparse. The oldest replied, "We'll see." The middle one reacted with a raised hand emoji. The youngest stayed silent for days. I did not push. I was used to students arriving on time because they chose to, not because they were forced. On the afternoon of December the 24th, I began preparing. The turkey had been marinated since the day before. Potatoes are peeled and kept in a bowl of cold water. The gravy warmed gently, the smell of butter and pepper filling the kitchen. I turned on the old radio, letting a familiar Christmas music station play softly in the background. Just loud enough to hear, not enough to drown out the sound of the knife on the cutting board. The dining table was extended to its full length, 10 seats. My 3 children, their spouses, and 4 grandchildren. I placed 2 children's chairs right beside my seat. I remembered how it felt as a child sitting next to my grandfather's legs, not reaching the edge of the table, yet still being favored. Those 2 chairs were brighter than the rest, lower with gently curved backs. I adjusted the spacing between them until it was even a professional habit from arranging classrooms. 7 o'clock. I washed my hands, changed into a dress shirt, and stood in the kitchen for another 10 minutes to bring everything to the right point. The table glowed under the warm yellow light. I looked at the wall clock. The minute hand hit the mark. The second hand ticked forward steadily, clearly. 7:30. All the dishes were laid out. Steam rose, rich aromas filling the room, enough to stop any hungry person in their tracks. I pulled out my chair, sat down, and placed the napkin on my lap. Out of habit, I waited. not an anxious wait, just giving latecomers a little grace the way I once did for students stuck in morning traffic. 8 o'clock. The food began to cool. The gravy thickened. The potatoes lost their ideal softness. The clock kept ticking evenly, each sound sharper in the quiet room. I did not stand up to reheat anything. I believe in discipline. If someone is late, the meal does not pause to wait. I sat upright, looking at a 10-seat table left empty. The light reflected off the wooden surface, highlighting the two children's chairs. I imagined kids running around laughing, asking endless questions. The thought did not hurt. It simply sharpened the contrast between what I had prepared and what was actually happening. 8:10. I reached for my phone, not to call and rush anyone, just to see if someone had messaged about traffic. The screen lit up. A notification from the family group chat appeared at the top of the list. My heart did not race. My body stayed still. I opened the group chat. The phone screen was still lit. The dining table lamp shone down on the glass, making every word stand out so clearly that it was impossible to ignore. I did not rush. My fingers scrolled slowly, the way I used to grade papers, reading to understand everything, not to react right away. The messages appeared in one continuous stream. This was not a careless sentence, not scattered texts. One look was enough to know this was a whole conversation that had already taken place, forwarded here by mistake in a moment of hurry. I understood very quickly they had another group, a group without me, a hypocritical old man, spent his whole life teaching and still dirt poor. Who still wants to listen to him lecture anyway? Underneath were laughing emojis, looping animated stickers, the kind people use when they think they are speaking in private, free to say whatever they want. I scrolled back up and read from the beginning again. Not because it was hard to understand. I just needed to be sure I was not seeing it wrong. Then the final line appeared short and decisive, like a closing statement. So what if he's a teacher? Out in the real world, he's still just an old man nobody needs. Right after that, the screen flickered slightly. One message disappeared. Then another gap followed. Someone had realized the mistake. Someone was scrambling to erase what I was never supposed to see. But I had read enough. I set the phone down on the table, right next to my plate. At that moment, I understood very clearly these words were not typed tonight. They had been said many times before in a conversation I had never been invited into. One wrong tap was all it took for that door to crack open, just enough for me to see everything inside. I read it the first time, my hand tightening slightly against the tabletop without realizing it. The second time, my eyes lingered longer on each word, as if staring hard enough might change their meaning. By the third time, my chest sank heavily, my breath struggling just to reach my throat. Not sharp pain, just weight and constriction. The first feeling was not anger, and it was not yet shame. It was a shock, a direct blow to something I had believed in for many years. I had prepared myself for indifference, for being forgotten, for last-minute cancellations. But I had never imagined I would be turned into a joke spoken about as lightly as the weather. I did not type a reply. I did not react with an emoji. I did not ask for clarification. I understood the mechanics of conversations like this too well. Even the smallest response is enough to turn the reader into the next form of entertainment. I had taught history long enough to know the first person to speak up in a closed circle is usually the one put on the table for dissection. I left the phone where it was, lifted my eyes from the screen, and looked toward the dining table. Two children's chairs were still tucked in close lower than the rest empty. I could clearly see every small scratch on the armrests, marks from hurried pulls from old meals once filled with laughter. Those images did not rush back all at once. They came piece by piece, slowly, just enough to remind me of everything I had done for them, without ever asking for anything in return. Once the oldest called me close to midnight. He had just been accepted into an MBA program at a private school, the tuition so high that even he hesitated saying the number out loud. I listened, sitting quietly on the edge of the bed where my wife had once lain before the hospital took her away for good. I asked only one question, as brief as every major decision I had ever made. How much do you need? The next morning, I transferred $42,000, the entirety of what I had saved for my pension from evening tutoring, and from the roof repair I had postponed through 2 rainy seasons. No paperwork. No repayment date. I thought simply my child's education was worth my stepping back. The middle one grew up during the years when I was teaching being a father and being a mother all at once. He chose media, comfortable with lights and polished words. Every time there was an event, he reminded me to wear a neat shirt and to speak carefully. I complied. I had gotten used to standing behind the scenes since the day my wife passed, the day I learned to cook for 3 children, to do laundry late at night, so mornings would not be late for school, to sign report cards with hands shaking from lack of sleep. Once he posted a long piece about an intellectual family, describing an exemplary teacher father who inspired him. The post received many likes. I read it and remembered nights sitting on plastic chairs outside emergency rooms, paying $16,000 for an emergency visit when a child had a high fever and insurance did not fully cover it. In real life, those words were rarely spoken directly to me. The youngest spoke the least. He grew up the fastest, perhaps, because he was used to watching me carry everything. He was comfortable with camera angles, lighting, and carefully curated photos. Every time I appeared in the frame, he adjusted my position and asked me to stand slightly to the side. I listened. I'd gotten used to making room since the day I carried him to the car, in the rain, his head resting on my shoulder, light enough that I was afraid of dropping him. In those years, I paid monthly for medicine, for the inhaler machine, for follow-up visits, small expenses that stretched on endlessly enough to teach me what it meant to care until exhaustion. Those memories did not knock me down. They pinned down each marker, each amount, each sleepless night, so I could understand why the words in that chat group had been typed so easily. When someone grows accustomed to receiving without looking back, they will see every sacrifice as a given. When someone chooses silence to keep a household peaceful, they will be mistaken for someone without boundaries. I picked up the phone again and looked at the group name at the top of the screen. It sounded so warm, so family-like. I did not change the name. I did not leave the group. I left everything as it was, the way one keeps a piece of evidence, not to accuse, but to remind oneself that some truths should not be erased. I set the phone back on the table face down. The movement was decisive, without hesitation. The soft sound of contact was clear enough in the quiet room. I turned to look at the 2 children's chairs one more time. This time I did not feel emptiness. I saw a very clear message. Some people deserve to be protected from words like those, and there are also people who have chosen to stand on the other side. I stood up and walked slowly toward the window. Outside, a few neighbor lights were still on. There was the distant sound of cars, someone's laughter drifting faintly through the air. Christmas night was unfolding as it always did. The world did not stop just because one dinner had been missed. In that moment, one thought surfaced with absolute clarity. This meal was not important enough for them to bother sending a message to say they were busy. It was not an appointment. It was not family. It was just a convenient option. Come if it suits them. Skip it if it does not. No notice required. I returned to the table and pulled out the chair, sitting down. Back straight. Hands placed neatly on the wooden surface. I did not need to write my decision down. It was already fully formed in my mind, word by word, like a question whose answer had been there all along. I spoke it out loud, not loudly, not harshly, just enough for myself to hear clearly. That's it. I looked into the space in front of me and added one more sentence. Anyone who does not consider this meal important does not need me to keep waiting. That night, I did not call anyone else. I did not send another message. I picked up the knife and cut my portion as usual, beginning a dinner prepared for 10 people, but meant for 1. And in my mind, a decision was complete. Tonight, I will not wait anymore. I didn't leave the dinner table right away. I cleaned up each item slowly, Just like every other night, plates stacked neatly, forks and knives washed clean, the tablecloth folded. Those familiar motions helped my mind settle no longer, pulled by the words I'd just read. When everything was done, I pulled out a chair and sat at the desk by the window. This corner had once been where I graded papers, prepared lesson plans, and replied to parents' emails for many years. I turned on the desk lamp, its yellow light spreading over the wood surface darkened by time. I opened my laptop, the screen lit up reflecting a tired but alert face. I've never been someone who yells. In the classroom, I don't need to raise my voice to maintain order. I believe what makes people stop and look again is not volume, but placing the truth exactly where it belongs. When students are wrong, I write it down. When parents complain, I present evidence. Tonight was the same. I wasn't trying to make noise. I began to organize. I opened my personal Facebook page. My page is not lively. No ads, no flashy images. Mostly old posts about education history, a few photos of past classes, a few parent meetings. I don't post regularly anymore, but the followers are still there. Former students, former parents, former colleagues. Not many, but familiar enough to recognize me immediately when I appear, and trusting enough not to scroll past. I created a new note on my computer. No title, just the date and time. I copied word for word the lines from the family group chat. No commentary, no explanation. I wrote the exact wording, the exact order, the exact timing. Each line stood alone, clear like event markers in a history lesson. When the text was done, I opened my contacts and found a familiar name. Noah. Noah is 26 years old and works in multimedia. He is the son of a former student. Last year, when he had just graduated, he asked me to write a recommendation letter. I helped without asking anything else. Later, Noah messaged me to say he had gotten a job. I called him. Mr. Daniel Noah answered his voice, slightly surprised. "It's me," I said. "Can you come over tonight?" There was a brief pause. "What's going on, sir? I need you to help me record a dinner," I said plainly. "I'm not taking revenge on anyone. I just want the truth to be seen." Noah didn't ask further. "I'll come right away." While waiting, I went back to the dining table. I adjusted the positions of the two children's chairs, placing them close to where I had been sitting earlier. I turned on the ceiling light as well. The lighting was just enough to make the room clearly visible without giving the sense of staging. Noah arrived on time carrying a backpack. He came in, looked around his gaze, stopping at the dining table, then nodded. "How do you want it filmed?" "Don't film my face at first," I said. "Just film the dining table and the empty seats." Noah set up the camera in the corner of the room. The frame fully captured the table and the two low chairs. The lighting was adjusted so the tabletop and chairs were clearly visible without highlighting anyone. I opened my personal Facebook on the laptop, selected live mode, no monetization, no effects, no clickbait title, public setting. I typed a single line in the description: Christmas night, a table for 10, one person. I turned to Noah. "Just let the camera run." The camera indicator light turned red. Noah signaled that we were live. I did not look into the lens right away. In front of me was the dining table, its wooden surface just bright enough, two children's chairs placed close together. I pulled out the chair and sat down, back straight, hands neatly resting on the tabletop. No need to adjust anything. Everything was already in its proper place. I took a slow breath in, not to gather courage, just to keep the rhythm. The room was quiet. Outside, Christmas night flowed on as it always did. "My name is Daniel," I said, my voice just loud enough to hear. "I teach history. I teach students how to look back at the past to understand the present." I paused for a beat, then continued. "Tonight, I'm not teaching anything. I'm just having dinner." I lowered my gaze to the plate, picked up the knife, cut a small piece, brought it to my mouth, chewed slowly. I did not look at the camera. I did not look at the screen. I focused only on the table in front of me. In the corner of the laptop, the viewer count began to tick upward, a few hundred, then over 1,000. The number rose slowly but steadily. I set the knife down and reached for my phone. The screen lit up. I opened the group chat. No need to hide names, no need to edit. I read, a hypocritical old man. I read slowly, clearly, without changing my tone. Spent his whole life as a broke teacher. I paused to chew another bite, then read on. Who still wants to hear a moral lecture? Laughing icons, animated images jumping and looping. I did not describe them. I simply read exactly what appeared. The view count surged. 30,000, 60,000, 100,000. I kept eating, small bites, as if this were the most ordinary dinner of my life. I reached the final line. So what if he's a teacher? Outside he's still an old man nobody needs. I folded the phone and placed it on the table. I said nothing more about those words. I chewed, swallowed, lifted the napkin and gently dabbed my mouth. My eyes never left the table. Comments began to flood in. The side screen flickered nonstop. Noah looked at me, then at the numbers, his expression unable to hide his shock. I'm a former student. I recognize you, sir. Oh my God, Mr. Harper. My father studied with you. He still mentions you. Is this a Christmas dinner? Why would his children talk like that? Familiar names appeared. Former parents tagged one another. Students from years ago left greetings. I did not reply. I did not nod. I continued eating as if everything around me were irrelevant. The view count passed several tens of thousands. Then I saw the names of community pages begin to appear in the share section. Some asked if I was hurt. Some urged me to end the live stream. Some grew angry on my behalf. I responded to none of it. I simply sat there at a table meant for 10 with 3 large empty chairs and 2 smaller lower ones. When the plate was nearly empty, I set the knife and fork down. I lightly clasped my hands on the table. I lifted my head and looked into the camera for the first time since going live. My eyes were not sharp, nor tired. They were simply the eyes of someone who had finished saying what needed to be said. I am not here to explain, I said, nor to ask anyone to take my side. I turned to look at the 2 children's chairs, then looked back into the lens. I just want these empty seats to be seen. I stood up, pushed the chair in neatly, picked up the plate and carried it into the kitchen. The camera kept rolling. The only sounds were footsteps and the soft rush of running water. When I came back, the screen was flooded with new comments. Among the lines of fast-moving text, one sentence appeared more still than the others. Your children will regret this. Very soon. I looked at that sentence for a few seconds. I did not frown. I did not smile. I reached out and turned off the live stream. On the computer, the broadcast ended, but Noah left the camera recording. The red light was still on. Noah stood there, not yet able to say anything. You should go home, I said. Thank you. When the door closed, I stood alone in the dining room. The table was still there. The chairs were still there. But from that moment on, I knew that dinner no longer belonged to me alone. And those who were absent tonight, whether they wanted to be or not, had already stepped into my final lesson. About 10 minutes later, Noah sent me a short text message. Sir, the clip is being reshared. I did not open the link right away. I poured myself a glass of water and drank slowly. When my phone screen lit up again, the notifications were already lined up. Not loud, not sensational. Just steady, continuous, like a series of bells striking a measured rhythm. The clip was reposted in a parent group from my former school, a familiar group name. I had attended meetings there, explained grades. There stood before those probing eyes there. The post did not include a long caption, just one short sentence. Does anyone recognize this teacher? That question alone was enough to set everything off. Below it, names began to appear. People tagging others. Parents calling each other in to look. Some recognized me immediately. Others needed a few more seconds to be sure. The comments followed without needing guidance. He taught history when my kid was in high school. That's right, Mr. Harper. Very strict. He's always lived pretty privately. I scrolled slowly, not looking for sympathy. Just observing. The way the public operates is no different from a disciplinary meeting. No one needs to rally anyone else. Each person contributes a line, then together they reorganize the story. Not long after the clip appeared on the page of a local education organization. This page usually shares stories about classrooms and veteran teachers. This time they simply reposted the video with a neutral line of introduction. No defense, no conclusion. That neutrality made it spread faster. People began to scrutinize more closely. Wait, doesn't his son work in banking? Yes, I saw it on LinkedIn. Not a low position either. And that daughter, she's an influencer, right? Always posting family photos. The pieces found each other. I did not need to explain. No one needed instructions. People took screenshots, stitched information together, asked questions. Meanwhile, a segment of the live stream was clipped out on its own. The part where I opened my phone and read the group chat, word for word. The part where I added no commentary. Just read, then kept eating. That clip was shared the most. Someone wrote, "No need to curse. Reading it like that is painful enough." Someone else replied, "The pain is that he keeps eating dinner like normal." I realized that it was precisely that calmness that made people uncomfortable on my behalf. They are used to tears to accusations. They are not used to someone sitting still and letting the public look on its own. A local newspaper ran an article the next morning. A short headline, "No embellishment, veteran teacher, mocked by his own children on Christmas night." The article did not interview me. They quoted the video, quoted online reactions. They used the word mocked, not conflict. That choice of word was enough for readers to understand the severity. A reporter called me. 1 missed call. Then 2. Then 3. I saw the name on the screen and did not answer. I had nothing more to say. I had finished my part in front of the camera. By noon, my phone began to vibrate continuously. No longer social media notifications. Calls. Unknown numbers. Familiar numbers. Some calls I recognized immediately by the area code. Others I did not need to guess to know who they were. I placed the phone face down on the table. The vibration still traveled through the wooden surface, steadier and more insistent than before. I did not pick it up. I did not need to look to know that the lesson had left my hands. This time the disciplinary board was not sitting in a meeting room. They were everywhere, and they had begun calling the names of those absent from that dinner table. The phone vibrated one more time. This time I picked it up, not out of curiosity. I already knew who was calling. I placed the phone flat on the table, my finger sliding lightly to the speaker icon. The sound filled the room clear and unfiltered. Noah kept the camera rolling. No live stream anymore, just a recording. The first voice came in fast, no greeting. "What the hell are you doing?" "Dad." His voice was dry, rushed, like he was trying to rein in something that had already slipped away. "Take the video down right now. Do you have any idea what this does to my job?" I didn't interrupt. I let him finish. When the gap between sentences appeared, I spoke. "You're worried about your job," I said slowly. "Dinner that night wasn't your concern." Silence on the other end for a beat. Then the call dropped. Before I could even put the phone down, the screen lit up again. A different name. I didn't change my posture, just tapped to answer. This time the voice came in sharp, unrestrained. "Are you out of your mind?" A curse slipped in. No need to repeat it. It poured out, unchecked. "What do you get from this? You want the whole world to see your kids as trash?" I looked down at the tabletop, the long wood grain running steady calm as any other day. I answered briefly. "I didn't put you there," I said. "You put yourself there." The voice faltered, then shifted to blame. Circumstances, pressure, how I didn't understand modern times. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. When he paused to breathe, I ended it. "You're done talking. I've heard enough." The call ended. The room returned to silence for a few seconds. I hadn't touched the phone except to answer. The camera captured everything. No cuts, no audio edits. The third time the screen lit up more slowly. I looked at the name. I knew this voice would be different. I answered. "Dad." The call was small, shaking, short breaths. "Dad." Crying spilled from the speaker, not loud, but enough to fill the room. She spoke nonstop, begging me to turn off the video, begging me not to make it bigger, saying she never thought things would turn out like this. I waited. I let the crying pass. When the breathing on the other end finally settled, I replied, "You call me when you need to," I said. "I'm listening." I paused, then continued my tone unchanged. "But tonight, I need you to sit still." There was no apology, no promise. I tapped the screen and ended the call. I placed the phone face down on the table. A clean, measured movement. I didn't say anything else, and I didn't leave my seat. Precise. Enough. Nothing more was needed. I stayed there, both hands resting in front of me, staring at the empty space where the screen had just lit up. Time moved slower than usual. No one spoke. No sound intruded. Just the room and me. The 10-seat dining table sat still. 2 children's chairs beside it, lower empty. The light spread evenly across the wood, revealing every small scratch. I looked at them longer than necessary. My chest tightened, not sharp, just heavier, like something had been set down and never lifted. In that silence, I understood exactly what had just happened. Not the calls, not the harsh or pleading words, but the moment I realized that the faces I once protected had exposed themselves. I didn't pull them down. I didn't push them up. They fell because there was nothing left to hold on to. I sat a while longer, not counting time, not waiting for anything. When the weight in my chest eased enough to stand, I reached out and turned off the light. The room sank into its familiar quiet. Only one thing had changed from this moment on. The people who called would never be able to say they hadn't said what they said, and I would never be able to go back to pretending I hadn't heard it. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. Not because I couldn't sleep, but because my body had gotten used to that rhythm after years of standing in front of a classroom. I made coffee and opened the window. Cold air rushed in sharp enough to clear my head. I didn't think about filing a lawsuit. I didn't call a lawyer. I knew exactly where I was. There are battles where taking each other to court only drags things out and waters them down. I chose a different way. I opened my computer and logged into the school's old email account. The inbox filled with familiar names, many of whom had left school more than 10 years ago. Some became doctors. Some became teachers. Some went into business. I didn't filter by title. I didn't single anyone out. I sent a short message the same way I used to send class announcements. The content was only a few lines. I am not asking you to take my side. I am only sharing something that happened. If you feel it's necessary, share it in your own way. I didn't attach an explanation. I didn't send a video. I only included a link. I hit send, then closed the inbox. I didn't reread it. I didn't edit a word. Once it was sent, I considered myself done speaking. I didn't post anything else on social media. My personal page stayed quiet. No new status. No replies to comments. I left that empty space for others to fill on their own. By noon, I received the first message from a former student. No small talk, no comfort. Just a link. A long post. Calm in tone. The writer talked about history classes, about how I graded harshly but fairly, about the times I stayed after school to explain again to kids who couldn't keep up. The post ended with one short sentence. I owe my teacher the first kindness of my life. That post was shared again, then another one, then a few more. Each person told a different story. No one used harsh words. No one attacked directly. They only talked about me as I once was. That evening, I ate dinner alone. The table still had 10 seats. The 2 children's chairs were still there. I didn't move them. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone. My personal page remained empty. No new posts, no responses. I let silence do its work. This time I wasn't the one giving grades. I was just the one who handed out the test at the right moment, and society graded it themselves in their own way. After everything online finally died down, I knew the story was not over. Public opinion was only the surface ripple. What truly bound them lay deeper in the place my children had grown accustomed to treating as an unquestioned foundation. I arranged a meeting with an old acquaintance, not a lawyer. He did not represent me. Legally, he simply helped organize records, and every change still went through the proper paperwork channels. I had no desire to turn this into a cold paper war. He had once managed assets for many families in the area and understood exactly how things worked without raising his voice. We met at a small, quiet cafe. No curiosity, no attention. I handed him the files. He reviewed every page slowly and carefully. When he closed the folder, he looked at me and asked only one question. "Are you sure I'm not doing this?" In anger, I replied, "I've thought about it long enough. The changes were made cleanly. Beneficiaries were adjusted. Access to assets was reordered under a new hierarchy. No loud notifications, no explanatory phone calls. Everything followed proper procedure with only one difference. I no longer placed my trust in the same positions as before." A few days later, I signed the papers to sell the large house. It was the home I had lived in for over 20 years, a place that once held children's footsteps, family dinners, arguments that faded into silence. I told no one. I moved out, neatly took only what I needed, and left the rest to the new owner. On the day of the handover, I stood on the front porch for a few extra minutes. No nostalgia, no regret, just a stopping point closed at the right time. A few weeks later, my phone rang. It was my eldest son. His voice tried to stay calm, but he spoke very quickly. He said the bank was processing a loan and needed confirmation of related assets. My house had been listed as a given. He needed a copy of the title, needed my signature, needed me to cooperate immediately to stay on schedule. I listened without interrupting. When I told him the house had already been sold, his voice dropped noticeably. Questions spilled out one after another, rushed and tangled, as if asking fast enough could force everything back into place. I did not explain at length. "I've already signed," I said. "The house is no longer in my name." A long silence followed, not because he didn't understand, but because for the first time, what they had always relied on had disappeared without asking permission. I hung up after that sentence. I didn't wait for a reaction. I didn't wait for another word. This strike was not loud. No one applauded. But it hit exactly what my children had never imagined. They could lose the certainty that everything would always be there ready to serve when needed. And from that moment on, I knew I had truly stepped out of my old role, not the man keeping an empty seat for them to return to, but someone who had stood up on his own, carrying his right to decide for himself. I didn't receive the news through any official calls. No one sent me a summary either. Everything arrived in a very ordinary way, scattered like offhand remarks people blurt out and then move on from. About 1 month after Christmas night, the first consequences finally began to show. A former parent mentioned it casually while standing next to me at a coffee counter. He lowered his voice and glanced around before speaking as if afraid someone might overhear. I heard the bank put him on temporary leave. They said they needed to review his personal image. I nodded, thanked him for the now cold coffee, and stepped aside. In my head there was no cheering, only a muted stillness. The thing he had relied on for so long was starting to crack. A few days later, news about the second one reached me in a different way. A former student sent me a link along with a short line. "Take a look when you have time." I opened it. A notice of termination of cooperation. The wording was gentle, the reason vague, but the meaning was painfully clear. When people begin to scrutinize the person behind the polished introductions, everything collapses faster than expected. I turned off the screen, looked down at the cup of tea that had gone cold without me noticing. I poured in more hot water, slowly as if stretching out a pause that felt necessary. By the time it reached the youngest, nothing was quiet anymore. Messages flooded community groups. Brands pulled contracts. Public apologies appeared. Comments that once praised now turned to probing and picking apart. The spotlight she was used to standing under suddenly became harsh, exposing every angle. An acquaintance told me softly that the girl had left her rented apartment and moved in with someone else. I listened and didn't ask more. The silence at this point no longer felt heavy. It felt like an emptiness that had already been accepted. The relationships around them fell apart as well. Friends kept their distance. Partners stopped calling. The in-laws' family began asking questions no one wanted to answer. Familiar circles closed one by one, revealing a void they had never had to face before. I didn't witness any of it directly. I only heard about it. But those fragments were enough for me to picture a complete image. Every support was disappearing one after another. Someone asked me if I felt heartbroken. I thought for a moment and answered honestly. I wasn't happy and I wasn't sad. It felt like grading final exams, knowing the score will disappoint someone but unable to change it out of sympathy. I had stepped aside from the moment everything began. I didn't push them here. I simply stopped shielding them. One afternoon, while watering plants on the porch, I received another call. The person on the other end spoke quietly, saying that all three were struggling badly to get by. I listened, my hand still holding the hose. The water flowed steadily, soaking into dry soil. I interrupted gently, "I understand." Then I added one more sentence, slowly enough to close the matter. "This is their test, not mine." That night I sat alone in the new house, smaller, quieter. The phone lay still on the table. No one needed me to explain anything. I opened the window and let the wind move through the room. In my mind there were no images of collapse anymore. Only one clear thought: everyone has to learn how to stand on their own 2 feet. Some learn early, some learn late, and some only learn when all support is gone. I turned off the light and closed the door. Tomorrow would come like any other day. For them, it would be the moment to start over from zero. For me, it would simply be a normal morning where I continue living my own life, carrying no burden for anyone else. Everything began with very simple invitations, just short messages, brief check-in calls. The voice on the other end slightly hesitant, as if they themselves were unsure whether I still wanted to show up. A community center invited me to come speak, not about the scandal. They made it clear they wanted to hear me talk about the teaching profession, about preserving one's self-respect, while standing in front of a classroom about being an adult in a time when people let go so easily. I read the invitation twice. There was no mention of payment, no request for promotion. I agreed. Then came a former school where I had taught many years earlier. The new principal called me, his tone measured but sincere. He said they were short of someone who could speak to students about responsibility, not through slogans, but through real experience. I asked only one question. Do the students want to hear it? He was silent for a few seconds, then answered, "They are waiting." I returned to the classroom on a quiet afternoon. The desks were different. The electronic board had replaced white chalk. But the students' eyes were the same, both curious and cautious. I did not give a long introduction. I only said that I had once been a teacher, once been a father, and once been silent for a very long time. The room grew still, not because I spoke well, but because there are things only those who have been through them can say. I did not accept any honorarium. When people asked, I answered plainly. I have lived long enough to understand that money is only a small part of standing before others. What I needed now was a voice, the act of speaking the things that had once been swallowed. And if someone among the listeners understood just one person, then the talk was worth it. My name gradually appeared again, but in different contexts. Not the father mocked by his child, not the teacher on Christmas night, but a teacher who once stood at the lectern, fell, and then stood back up. I read those introductions and felt neither pride nor bitterness, only that they were accurate. Some people asked me about my family, about my children, about grandchildren. I answered briefly. I said that at present I was not ready to meet again, not because of resentment, but because there are boundaries that must be kept so that both sides can learn respect. Children and grandchildren are not rewards to be bargained with. They need to grow up with clarity, not inside rushed reconciliations. In the evening when I returned home, I sat and reread old notes, not to prepare for the next lecture, but to remind myself that this life was never meant to have only one role. I had once been the one in the background, the one who carried the weight, the one who stayed silent. Now I choose to stand straight, speak just enough, and move forward. My second life is no louder than the first, but it is steadier. I no longer wait for anyone to validate who I am. I know it clearly, and for the first time in many years, I feel that I am living true to the profession I chose, teaching others first and foremost by being a person who does not bow his head to contempt. I turn off the light, close the door. Tomorrow, another classroom is waiting, not for me to save anyone, only for me to speak what I believe in the voice of someone who has completed one full cycle of life and begun again calmer than before. The phone rang while I was sitting alone in the living room. No television, no music, just the steady ticking of the wall clock. The screen showed an unfamiliar number. I looked at it for a few seconds, then picked up. "Grandpa?" That voice made me freeze. No need to ask who it was. I knew immediately. My grandchild. I straightened my back slightly, an old reflex from years of preparing to speak with students. "Yes, I'm listening," I said, my voice slow and even, revealing nothing of what was running through my mind. The child spoke a little fast, as if afraid of being interrupted, talking about schoolwork, a difficult math problem, a history passage not yet understood, a concept the teacher had only skimmed over in class. I listened to everything without cutting in, then explained each part simply the same way I had taught for decades. On the other end of the line, I heard a quiet sigh of relief. "Oh, I get it now," the child said, voice brighter. I did not mention the parents. I did not ask where the call was coming from. I did not probe to see who might be standing nearby. I focused only on the child, on the questions on learning. I asked which subject was liked most. The answer came instantly without hesitation. I told a short story related to that subject, just enough to make it stick. While talking, I heard a very small sound in the distance, a chair shifting, a breath being held. I knew someone else was listening. I kept the same rhythm, no change in tone, no lowering it, no raising it. The call lasted more than 10 minutes. Before hanging up, the child said softly, "When I don't understand my lessons, can I call you?" I answered immediately, "Anytime." That was all. No conditions. No other promises. When the call ended, I set the phone down on the table. My hands were steady, but in my chest there was a very clear feeling a position had just been reestablished. I did not need to tell my children that they had lost any authority. I did not need to bring up the past. It was enough that a child, in the moment of greatest need, had chosen to call me first, and the adults standing beside that child, whether they wanted to or not, were forced to hear it. That evening, I opened my old textbooks and marked a few pages. I did it for the next call, not to prove anything, simply because I am still the person a child turns to when the correct answer is needed. And I understand this very clearly. There are humiliations that do not require shouting or public display, yet they follow people for a very long time because they remind them that even their own child knows who is truly trustworthy. The request to meet came a few days after the child's phone call. Not just one, but all three. Short messages, clipped wording, none of the familiar confidence left. They said they wanted to meet to talk things through clearly. I read them, put the phone down, left it there for a while, then replied. I agreed with a few conditions. Public place. No money talk, no pleading, no explaining the past by shifting blame. They replied very quickly, yes. We met at a small cafe near the library. Afternoon, light foot traffic. I arrived early, chose a table outside on the patio. A light breeze, just enough light. I sat upright, placed both hands on the table. The familiar posture I always took when preparing to listen to a student present. They arrived later. All three stopped short when they saw me. No one sat down right away. I gestured slowly. Finally, they pulled out chairs. No one joked. No one held my gaze for long. The eldest spoke first, a hoarse voice talking about pressure about things they never expected. The second cut in mentioning work public opinion. The youngest stayed silent, head lowered. I listened to everything. I did not interrupt. I did not nod. I let each sentence pass the way I used to let students finish their presentation before grading. When they stopped, I set my coffee cup down. The soft clink was enough to draw all three of their attention. I did not mention the group chat. I did not mention the house. I did not mention the Christmases with empty chairs. I spoke briefly, clearly. I'm not here to argue, and I'm not here to forgive or to blame. They looked at me, waiting. I continued my voice steady. I taught you how to tell right from wrong. I did that for many years with my students and with you. My part is finished. No one spoke. I stood up, adjusted my coat. Before leaving, I said one last sentence without emphasis. Without lowering my voice, I once taught you ethics. Now you study them on your own. I walked away first. I did not look back. Behind me, I knew they were still sitting there, each with their own thoughts. I did not need to see more. Outside the cafe, I took a deep breath. It felt lighter than I expected. Not because of winning or losing, but because I had placed the final period. Some relationships do not need to be repaired with words. They only need boundaries to be redrawn clearly. That is enough. That evening I went home, opened the door, turned on the light. The room was quiet. The dining table was neat. The two children's chairs were no longer there. I had put them away the day before, like something that needed to be done. I made tea, sat down, opened a book. No one needed me to wait anymore. And for the first time in a very long while, I understood one thing very clearly. A teacher does not need former students to know whether he taught correctly or not. He only needs to live fully the rest of his life. That is enough. Some people think revenge means making the other person collapse right in front of your eyes. I am different. I only need them to keep living, but without the support they once thought was a given. I did not lose my children. I only returned them to their proper place. Not higher, not lower, just outside what I used to carry for them. I still teach. I still talk with new students. I still answer the phone when a child needs help understanding a difficult lesson. I did not defeat anyone. I simply did not lose myself. If you are listening to this, perhaps you have also sat before an empty dining table. Perhaps you have stayed silent, thinking endurance was the only way to keep a family together. I'm not saying you must do what I did. Everyone has a different limit. But if there is one thing I learned after all of this, it is this silence is not always compassion. Sometimes it is just how others become used to stepping over you. If this story made you see yourself somewhere in it, leave a period in the comments, just that. So I know you're listening. You can also write to tell me where you are listening to this story and at what time of day. If you want to hear more stories about family, about boundaries, about people who were once taken lightly but did not lose their dignity, you can follow me here. It turns out there are times when people do not need noise. They only need truth.